In this video, I would like to provide you a compressed recap of everything we did yesterday so you can understand the usefulness of using the paint mode for actually simulating different material separation ideas or concept. In the last week, I basically showed you how we can really create the actual object separation. And this is, for example, a crucial step if we would like to actually print this. So, for example, here I have now added a solidify modifier, and yeah, so I have my two-dimensional or flat shell turned into a three-dimensional volume, and this I could send to the printer. But as you might have realized, it is a very precise but yet also very labor-intensive process, and you should only do this when really you would like to make a test print. If, for example, you are just in the stage of playing through different ideas, specifically for styling, this might not necessarily be the most ideal technique. And again, 3D should not be something that is used at the end of your project, but you should use 3D technology throughout your design process just to help you and to inform your design. So, many words, let's get ready. Here I have my original half model. And I would like now to create a black and white image, which I can use to tell Blender where it should present different materials. So think about this similar to the way how layer masks or layer masks in Photoshop work. Exactly the same idea, just three-dimensional. Here I switched this to the UV editor, and maybe I can create a new image. Let's call this material separation for 1. We have different width and height, so this is like 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels. Color is black. This is all okay, so I click OK. Now in edit mode, if I select everything, nothing really here happens. And if I click on the data display, you see UV maps here is empty. Now, the moment I press inside 3D view, so my mouse is here, the U key, and then click unwrap, you can see actually now I have my computer model unfolded into a flat two-dimensional representation. And also something for you just to keep in mind, and that's one of the nice things about Blender. Whatever you do in 3D view with G or R or S is exactly the same inside the image editor. So I can press R, G, and S, even like with X or Y. So I would like to rotate this UV layout a little bit so it's not awkwardly, and it's also because my model is oriented horizontally, and now this unwrapping is horizontally. And you see now here inside the mesh data, we also have something called UV map. So what does UV map really mean? Well, the problem all programs have is they're representing complex three-dimensional surfaces. And how should the software know how to put a text or an image perfectly over it? So for that you have to, like we did, unfold it, make it flat. And UV, think about it like X and Y, it is a coordinate system. So this image, we place the mesh onto it, and whatever, for example, is under a face will be positioned exactly here. So for example, this black color would affect this face, or here, this face. So basically on a face-by-face basis, it helps you to transfer the image you have two-dimensionally here and place it over our 3D object. Sounds a little bit abstract, so let's see what we can do with this. Let's create a material for our cloth iron. So I go to material. Also again, make sure you're in cycles render. Click new. Maybe gave this a different name. Let's move this one up a little bit. And this one maybe I make blue. I like blue. I'm from Germany. We like blue. And then Shift D. And maybe this one I make white. And you might remember last time when you did your first step, there's also an issue you cannot really use both at the same time. So we have to add a material mixer. And with the material mixer, we can mix between those two different material types. If you go to the viewport shading and you select material instead of solid or wireframe, you actually see a preview of that material. You see? So when I slide it, you can see that in 3D. So it's actually pretty nice. So now the mix shader is useful if I want to blend numerically between those two materials, but what I would like is just to define certain parts of my model being blue and other certain parts being white. That is now where this black image is actually coming in handy. So inside here, I press Shift A and then go Input and Texture Coordinate, and again Shift A, Texture Image. Shift Space, let me increase this. So what did we do here? Let me explain this again. So texture coordinates, that is a node that basically provides different approaches in how a two-dimensional image can be put over a three-dimensional surface. So for example, reflection. So if I would use an image, it would look like it has a distortion of reflection. So for example, camera, it will always be perpendicular to the camera, or UV, that is for example the one we want. So you also see all those dots are colored, so this one goes into here. Inside image texture, I simply go to material separation, and the color output, this one I can drag into the factor. Okay, so, and again, this UV here is basically using this relationship of the mesh to the image, so where this mesh is placed on this image. That relationship is being told or passed to the texture input or node, and the texture then is being used and fed into here. So now it's time that we actually switch into painting our black and white image. So let's take a look at the painting mode. Let me Shift spacebar, increase this view. We can switch inside the UV image editor from view into paint mode. And once you do this, we go to properties. You will notice that first you will have this additional paint mode, and here I can move, for example, my faces. When you go to paint, I cannot really touch them, but I can see them because I'm inside edit mode. So you see, when I'm in edit mode, They're kind of like projected onto it, and I can use those as a reference. So let's say, for example, the part of my handle and should remain blue and other stuff should be white. So what I can do now is, when I go to paint with my mouse, paint over it. So you see, for example, there now what is white. So again, and that's what I meant, like when I paint, for example, over this face and over this face and over this face. That is what UV means. Your mesh is being put into a two-dimensional coordinate system. It's being put over an image, and what is below the mesh, that texture or image is being transferred onto your 3D mesh. Okay, two things to keep in mind. Very important. First, only paint in black or paint in white, no grayscale. We have radius. So radius obviously is the size of the brush. And we have strength. Strength, for example, defines how transparent or opaque the brush is. So what you want to work with is actually pure white, pure black, and 100% strength. So for example, if I now go to black and paint over here, you can see now I can paint where I would like, for example, the handle to be blue. The problem with working with gray is simply gray is then seen as a percentage. So for example, this maybe could be medium gray. So maybe it's 50% between those two materials. And what I want is just one material or the other material, nothing really in between. So let's see, what else do we have? So this should be, for example, about material separation lines. That means those have crisp edges. And right now we don't really have anything that looks crisp. In Photoshop, now you have your radius and your strength, and you have your hardness. And the hardness we have actually here as well, and it's called the paint curve. So what this basically means, let me zoom in here for a second. And if maybe I make this bigger part here black. And let's switch to white. This little hand here decides if you use a tablet, so it's pressure sensitive. And those values for the radius and the strength, we can do with F. So in here, if you press F, you can see kind of like a preview of my brush. If you press Shift F, you can adjust the strength by just sliding your mouse to the center or to the edge. Now let me go down to the paint curve. So what you see here actually right now, you see that from the center it is solid, and then to the edge it gets transparent. And that's basically what's happening here. So see, the left side is the center of my brush, the right side is the edge of my brush, and the top part, this means everything here is solid to transparent. So for example, in this part, everything is solid and then slightly starts becoming transparent, gradually more becomes transparent, and then here to the end, so the last edge, it really becomes quicker to transparent. So it's kind of like your fall off curve. And that's, for example, what you see here. So pay attention to what, for example, happens if I change it to this. You see? You have some interesting brushes actually, where the center is opaque and then the edge becomes opaque again. And you have different settings for this actually down here with those icons. So they all define, for example, different fall off curves. What we would like to use for simulating material separation lines is a brush that is mainly solid and then has a very nice and soft edge. And to do this, we can just click on this triangle, click on this point, and you see you can move those around. So this one has to be lower right corner, and this one, when I click it, should go up and to the right. Press F, maybe click it. And there, for example, you can see this is already a lot crisper than this one, but not really as crisp maybe as I want. So I could maybe move this one over a notch more. And let's click. And that, for example, looks okay. When you click on those buttons, those points, you can also type in the numeric value down here. So you see this one, for example, is very nice and crisp. So maybe we're going to work with that. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit, and then let's try to paint there. Okay, see, that's basically the way how then you can create nice and crisp lines. Now the problem by painting 2D here, you can use the mesh here, of course. It's kind of awkward working here, but then your object to proof is on the left side. And that's not really a big problem because we can also paint actually in 3D. So we switch from edit mode to texture paint. Let me shift spacebar, increase the view, press T for the toolbar, and it's basically now the same here with brush. So I could maybe lower this and just simply over here paint. So you see that basically whatever I do here, the software then updates for me. So it's actually pretty awesome. There's only one problem. For example, those center lines sometimes can look a little bit crazy. So for example, what I have here, you see those artifacts. And I think that's what we have here. So in that case, I then have to go in here and simply paint over this edge. And you see there, it's cleaning it up for me. So it's not really a problem. So you can work in both modules or views actually at the same time and just make use of each one when best appropriate. There. Perfect. It doesn't look too bad. Now let's say you do not have a tablet, you have a mouse, and you would like to make really nice and controlled lines. If you're working with Sketchbook Pro, you know that the new version of Sketchbook Pro has a smooth stroke command. And that actually stabilizes your curve a little bit, and Blender has the same. So you go to stroke, turn on smooth stroke, and then when you click, you see there is a white line. And where the white line ends on the left side, that is actually where I would start to paint. So maybe let's go to black and So you can actually, with a mouse, work slowly and get awesome, nice and soft curves. See, it's perfect. You have different values here. For example, minimum distance between from last point before the stroke continues. So I think this means this, and this means, yeah, see, my line is much bigger. So it's kind of like you're pulling basically a pen in a delay after you. And the factor means gives a smoother, higher values are better strokes. Let's see. Yeah, well, that's true. Whoa, 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 whoa. This line is really long. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I hope this makes a little bit sense. Basically, the one stroke is for defining, like when, for example, it starts, like how far you can move, because it when your hand jitters a little bit, it has to even that out, and then the second one, or is basically the second one is for the evening out, and the first one is more kind of like when it starts calculating it. But most times I keep it at here and just with the radius work a little bit, because the problem is I think, does this actually work? Let me try this. Actually, I don't know. Does this work for continuous input? Continuous grab is there. Yeah, so it does not actually work for continuous grab. So you cannot really push your mouse way over, because I have to paint on here. So again, you see I have a small issue just there. So I can paint all those parts there. And in here, for a moment, I would like this one to be turned off. And then black. There, there, and let's see how this looks. Perfect. This is amazing. Okay. That's basically how you can use the paint module for making different variations. And sorry, for how to create a black and white image, and then paint basically a mask which you can use to separate between different materials. Because the beauty is, it doesn't really matter what material I'm mixing, because like in Photoshop again, this works like a clipping masks. It decides, or like a stencil mask, where which material you're going to see. So you can then afterwards still continue working on your materials without having to be concerned about kind of like where you see each one.